Extinction. Hell on a dead Earth. A post-apocalyptic hellscape ridden with corrupted abominations, fallen cities, and titanic monstrosities. It is here that I must survive 100 days and find the strength and courage to bring down Ark's God King. Through raining meteors, hordes of corrupted, titanic beasts, and my own stupidity, I must fight my way to the top and conquer these desolate ruins. Will I be able to survive, or will the Lord of Shadows bring my doom? Find out as I survive 100 days on Ark Extinction Ascended. I arose from the city floor on day one, finding myself in the only sanctuary in these hellish lands. The only safety I might find, and oh, I'm dead already. Spawning in the sanctuary, I explored my new surroundings, gathering my first bits of materials to get the tools I would need to survive. Gathering wood by breaking my knuckles, picking some stones off the ground, plucking berries and fiber from bushes, and crafting myself the starting bits of equipment. Managing to get a pickaxe because I yearned for the mines. And I went hard away at bashing them rocks, which with even more materials, I crafted more stuffs. And then I needed hide. Kill you. So after getting some of that, I managed to get myself some reusable bolas, which I then used them to hold down my victims as I sent them to their god. Doing that as I went along the city floor, getting a bearing of my new surroundings, and taking the site of ASA's upgrade of Extinction, finding it absolutely astonishing, where I was able to knock out a parasaur to assist me in traversing through the city safely, as even though this was the safest area on the map, there was still danger at every single turn. Using the hide that was so politely donated to me, I was also able to fashion myself some nice hide clothes to suit myself in, where with my gear at a suitable level, I went out and searched for some raptors, wanting to yet again try my mob method. But like Aberration, this method eluded me, as I struggled to find any raptors, which was starting to become a problem as Extinction's fauna proved to be an actual problem. And while getting bullied, I found another danger looming above, Zaldrir dragons from the Dragon's Kingdom mod, which in the shadows of these titanic dragons, I was petrified. So far, Extinction has had me on the edge at every turn. But with all these dangerous creatures and defense units came for the opportunity to scavenge. Their bloodthirsty carnage leaving a cascade of bodies all throughout the area, allowing me to go around the area getting plenty of hide, metal, oil, and electronics as I harvested the bodies of the fallen, where I stumbled across a terror bird, which would be a suitable beginning for my mob, so I went about knocking it out and taming it, immediately proving useful as soon as it tamed by helping me bring down a defense drone that was a little too aggressive for my taste. And with my new companion, I went about doing some father-son murdering, where I managed to find a tech raptor, which I went about taming that guy, adding yet another addition to my fold, which with the startings of my pack, I then went and searched for a spot to make a temporary camp, finding an elevated roadway which kept me away from the dangers of below, setting up a small crafting station, and getting some meat to cook. Heading back out for some more things to tame, where I found some raptors that I could tame, so I tried to, but my aim was hot garbage and I ended up getting myself killed instead. Retrieving my stuff, I went about trying to get those raptors again, but they had decided to go and fight an enforcer, which pretty much guaranteed their death, so I just gave up on trying to get those two. Going around to see if I could find anything else to tame, yet I wasn't able to find anything in my means, and raptors for some reason seemed non-existent, besides their corrupted variants. That's an untamable, that's a bad, I can't bonk that one. Oh shit, I can't bonk those. Oh, it's a group. Get stuck on that guy. Okay, they're stuck on this guy. Now I need to get unstuck. Okay. No! Wrong thing! Stego stuck! Where some Armodoggos decided to greet me while I was looking around, with some unadulterated abuse, nearly killing my parasaur. Thankfully, I was able to escape. So with all that abuse and misfortune, I decided to head back to camp for a little bit, getting some food and getting to work on expanding my crafting stations. Where at this point, I gave up on the idea of my mob and instead wanted to try and get a Pteranodon and some cryoballs from the Dino Depot mod so that I could go out further into the city for some better taming. But that would have to wait as I went about getting the resources for some forges and smithies. Which only then, when I changed my plans, did I finally find some raptors, trapping them with bolas, firing a low level from existence, and knocking out the other to add to my companionship. Where I brought it back to camp, and from on high I spotted a beaver dam, so I went and got that immediately. And from there I continued grinding, placing some forges, and cooking some raw metal I had gotten. And with that cooking, I decided to head out with my raptors to go on a hunt, where I found a decent parasaur, so I went about taming that guy. Where a horse decided to stroll up while I was waiting, so for fun I decided to take a shot at taming it, though its taming was abysmally slow, so I ended up abandoning it, where I found that my brand new para was getting assaulted by a defense unit. So with my posse, I sent that thing back to factory settings. It was day 2 when I brought my pack back to camp, using some of the cooked metal to craft a smithy and get myself a metal pick, a Dino Depot digitizer to assist me in my terra plan, and getting a crossbow. Which with these new tools, I went out to look out for some metal nodes so I could get even more metal to continue my progression. Finding some nearby and harvesting it, but wanting more, I also went about getting some more metal from the river rocks as well. Finding a decent terra while I was doing that, which I went about knocking out, but But when I tried to name it, the game crashed, sending me back to day 1 when I was still taming the parasaur. So getting back home after it tamed, it turned back to day 2, where I went about getting everything that I had lost during the reset, where I ended up finding a raptor while I was out, taming that, and then going out to reharvest the metal. And while I was looking around, I ended up finding a baby stego that was pretty decent level, and needing a bulky harvester, I knew my best bet would be to get it. So, gathering my pack and leveling them up, I went about orphaning the child. But it's okay. It's not an orphan anymore. I adopted it. Bringing the pack back home, I went around doing some more searching, finding some more raptors, which I added to my collection, bringing them back home to find a Terra flying right in front of me, so I bullied it, and it was bad level. But another came by that was better level, so I went about taming that one, naming them PT when they woke up, where I saddled it up, though my American was showing, so I told it to commit some war crimes for street cred, leveling it up enough so I could fly, taking it back home and using some of the metal that I cooked up to get me some more metal gear, which another good Terra fell straight into my lap, so I rewarded it with brain damage. Adding another flyer to my collection, and with all the progress I had made, I decided it was time to finally find a good place to build, picking up all my crafting stations, cryo-balling my boys, did I forget to mention I got cryo-balls while I was out, and then using my 2 Terras to carry it all as I took to the skies in search for a base spot, which I found one pretty quickly as the city was abundant with safe flat areas to live, this particular one being extremely open and spacious. And while I was indecisive at first, I ended up calling this platform my home, throwing out my creatures and saddling my new stego, which had grown up, using it to clear out the grass in the area, then going around with it for wood and thatch, which this would help me to build my first house. Thereafter reassembling my crafting station so that I would have the starting infrastructure I needed, though I knew I would need more wood, and the stego was growing a little too slow for my taste, so I went out with my Terra on the look for some beaver dams, which they eluded me unfortunately, so I instead went about using my pickaxe on a plethora of trees and soon-to-be lifeless bodies, going into day 3. And while I was harvesting, a fucking skyrat had stolen all of my spoiled meat that I was saving to use for narcotics, so while I went around getting more wood, I was also getting a bunch of meat to split for rapid spoiled meat gathering, which for some reason PT loved getting itself beaten. And speaking of a Terra, I ended up finding a pretty decent one minding its own business, which I couldn't allow, so I went up, beat them down, and force-fed them my meat. Ayo, pause. But before I could tame it, some ants decided to ruin its taming effectiveness. That sucks. I tamed it anyways. But after that, and getting some more wood, I felt content with the amount I had gathered, so I went back home, crafting myself some flak armor while I had waited for the meat in my inventory to spoil, getting myself dripped out in some clean metal armor. And to prepare for the spoiled meat, I went ahead and made some mortars and pestles, putting them to use once the meat had spoiled to start making a decent starting cache of narcotics. And it was about time that I had started the construction of my new home, having an ambitious plan to make a 2-story log cabin, which as I began planning it, I knew I would need more wood for construction. So after placing out the starting foundations, I went out with my stego to go on a massive wood run in the area near the stadium, where I spotted a really good tech stego wandering about, and having some newly crafted tranks from the returning extra trank mod, I went about knocking it out. But as soon as I knocked it out, I went out to throw my own stego for harvesting, which crashed my game, sending me all the way back to when I had just started getting wood on foot with Pete. So I went about getting back to where I had crashed, crafting out a bunch of structures to clear out my stego's inventory, and then taking them back down to the city floor to try harvesting again. Going about that, getting a ton of wood, killing things to recollect my spoiled meat cache, crafting structures with the wood I had gotten, and retaming that para that I had lost as well. Going around for a long while, getting as many resources as I could possibly get, eventually getting what I thought would be enough for the build, so I wrapped up my wood gathering session. Where at home, I started the crafting of some spark powder and narcotic, beginning the placement of my home thereafter. However, as I began building, I started to realize that my plans were a little bit too ambitious, as the ceiling above my platform proved to be an obstacle. So I decided to change up my plans from a 2-story cabin to more of a 1-story warehouse. And while building, I was able to experience my very first meteor storm in ASA, watching as hell fell to earth in spectacular fashion, awing at the storm before returning to my building and soon enough finishing the structure of the base. Not the most elaborate base that I've made, but it was well enough, which by then most of the narcotics had been crafted, so with those I remade my trank arrows, planning to use them to finally get me a proper collection of harvesting dinos, mainly an Anki, which I found were very common in the city, finding one immediately as I went to the city floor, knocking them out and getting them tamed. Finding a decent Megaloceros while I was waiting for that, so I went ahead and knocked them out as well, which both finished on day 4. And with that tech stego still wandering around, I went ahead to try and tame that sucker again, knocking it out and waiting for it to tame. Which while waiting for it to do so, I went about getting some resources to create some decorative additions to my house, as it's kind of just a box with a pointy end. Getting some small walls which I could turn into fences and some pillars. I also went around looking for a beaver, as I did not know what wood gathering creatures spawned on the map besides for beavers that I had seen, and the mammoths in the snow, which I was not going to be going there anytime soon. But instead of finding a beavis, I found a sleeping dragon, and not wanting to have to deal with it, I did a CIA and made that motherfucker no longer exist. I mean, what dragon? There was never a dragon. What are you talking about? Shut the fucking mouth! which eventually the stego tamed, where I decided to name it Technic, and it had a child, so I claimed that too and named him Tech Boy. See, Draco from 2 days ago, that's how you get a child, with consent. And still wanting to get some more tames, I went out towards the westernmost part of the city to look for Argies and Rexes, needing some muscle and a flyer that I could reliably use for grinding. Coming to the Green Obelisk, where I'd found some Argies that were inadequate, and also noticing a lack of Rexes. So still needing some kind of muscle, I decided to name a med-level Karna to at least have some strength, naming them Brian because goated reference. Then finding a level 90 Argie, which I decided having an Argie was better than having no Argie, so I went ahead and knocked that out too. Which with those tamed, I was done with that area for the time being. Flying my way back home, where on the way I found another Argie in the upper city, which was a decent level, so I went about taming that pronto, knocking it out and adding it to my collection. Then heading back home, where I decided to go and place my new cosmetic additions that I had crafted onto my base, making it look a decent bit better. Now with home established, I decided to furnish it with all my crafting stations, moving what I had on my temporary station into the base, and expanding my operations with more mortars, forges, and smithies. With that done, I went out to go thundercrunch some bugs, needing some chitin to make my new Argie a saddle. Getting enough to just do that, saddling up the higher level Argie and the Enki, which I had named Krunk. Heading out with both of them to go on a metal run, wanting to get a start on getting to the next phase in Ark. Heading to the Green Obelisk, where I had seen some metal, where I found a dragon, and it was kinda getting on my nerves, so I went ahead and did a Rhaegal. There you go. Where I spotted a level 140 Doed. Don't mind if I do. Knocking out that guy and going around for some of the metal while I waited, which in day 5, they tamed, and I named the blue dude Raz. Gotta say, Extinction is definitely no slouch in the harvester department, so with that done, I was able to put my full attention onto the metal run, going around the Green Obelisk and the Wasteland Edge, where I found a decent gas bag, which I decided to knock out and tame, planning to use them as a mass resource transporter. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that the RG would just be better all around, being able to actually carry the harvesters that I would need, and being able to carry just as much as a gas bag, so yeah, it's kind of pointless. But anyways, I tamed them and named them Plug. And since I named the gas bag, I realized that the RG also was a name, so I went ahead and gave them the beautiful name of Sky. Then heading back out for some more metal, but I found that there wasn't really that much in the Green Obelisk area, so I ended up just heading home with what I had. Getting back, where I crafted up some more spark powder to aid in the cooking of the metal, placing it and the raw metal into the forges and starting to get it all cooked. Where with those resources and others that I had been gathering up to that point, I was able to make myself some fabricators, which were the gateway to the next phase in Ark. And thankfully to my metal run, I would have just enough to get a start on the next thing I needed, an indie forge. Though, to get that, I would literally need everything else that an indie forge needs. The hardest of those being polymer, which unlike Aberration and Scorched Earth, there wasn't really an apparent easy way of getting it on this map, until I remembered corrupted nodules exist. And for those who don't know, corrupted nodules act as a substitute to polymer, just like organic polymer, which all I needed to get that was to kill some corrupted creatures. So with that thought, I went out with Brian to try and harvest some, going to the wasteland where I immediately found a pair of Dimetrodons, which I really couldn't pass up, knocking them out and taming them, dubbing them Sail and Sail. I will now, henceforth, never specify which one for the rest of the video. Good luck keeping track. Then finally taking my first proper dip into the wastelands of Extinction, where I managed to find a level 125 Rex on the outskirts, which while I appreciated Brian, I definitely needed something with a little bit more firepower, so thus I went about knocking it out and taming it, naming him Rudy, which doesn't make sense because that's a Baryonyx and not a T-Rex, but you know what, fuck it. Cryoing them up and then heading back out for more creatures, completely forgetting the reason why I was out there because ADD go brr. Eventually delving back into the city where I found a decent Megatherium, which would be very good for chitin collection, so I went about knocking out and taming them, which for some reason, I really have no idea why, I wanted to name them Sadie. No reference, no reason, just Sadie, which I eventually made my way back home to craft saddles for my 2 new companions, knowing both would be powerful comrades. But before I went back out, I went on a berry run with Technic to get more narcos for narcotics to tame more creatures, cause the Legion must expand! Then heading out with my newly saddled Rudy to go out hunting, finally getting back on track and grinding for some corrupted nodes, which made me realize that the last time I had actually ridden a Rex was back when I recorded the 100 Days on Scorched Earth, back in April of last year. Yeah, I'm sorry for the space between these videos, man. And while going through the wastes, I spotted a tickle turkey. I finally had my favorite harvesters after 3 years of 100 Days videos, but it wasn't good, so I ignored it. Where I ended up wandering around the Snow Dome, managing to find a level 140 RG, which I wanted to tame to start the foundations for an army to bring down the Desert Titan. And since I was already there, I decided to head in, immediately finding a level 125 Snow Isle, which, how could I pass that up? Getting back home in day 6, where I decided to go ahead and get together the infrastructure to make a toilet, as I wanted a quick way to get spoiled meat, which, with it crafted, I went ahead and shat on my meat. Oh, fucking god, that's disgusting. Which did give me a ton of spoiled meat, which I went to use to make more narcotics, which in turn, I used to make more trank arrows, because subjugation is key to survival. With my new snow owl, I wanted to get them saddled, which I also decided to name them Picks. Again, no reason, no reference, just Picks. Heading out with my new companion in search for a kangaroo to expedite my berry harvesting operation. Also on the search for Rexes and Argies, as yes, I needed both of those stale, and Rudy needs someone to fuck. Heading to the snow, because that's where I thought all three could spawn. Instead, finding a level 135 snow owl. Fuck it, why not? Collecting my new companion, and then venturing into the snows. Not finding a root. But I did find a level 140 Yudi, which I decided to tame as they would be vital for the kibble operations ahead. Knocking it out, getting harassed by a mana garmer, which this ADHD-ridden bastard would be very useful, so I decided to try and tame that as well. However, as a mana, they did not stand still at all. So that was much easier said than done. Eventually trying to use Pix's ice ability to freeze it long enough for me to get a shot off on it, but because I aimed like a toddler holding an artillery cannon, I struggled to hit it at all. But I was able to finally get a trank into it, and thank God for extra tranks, because it knocked out immediately. I could not fucking handle it if it was regular tranks, dear God. Which then I was able to tame my first mana garmer of the playthrough, naming them Finger. Finger. So with those two, I went on looking, finding some... Come get some freedom, motherfuckers! Getting a decent amount of oil, I moved on, eventually leaving the snow biome, where in the wastelands, I managed to find my first enraged Rex, which is basically just a tech alpha Rex. But all the same, I went ahead and killed it with Rudy, getting some decent EXP. And still wanting a Roo, I moved into the Desert Dome, because if Roos could spawn on Scorched Earth, why not there? Which should have been obvious, figuring Aussie mate, pretty quickly finding a level 145 Roo, that as soon as I knocked it out was attacked. Okay, it's fine, whatever. Taming it and naming them Sis. And I went ahead and just left the desert in day 7, heading out to the wastelands for a little bit. Just wandering around. Found a Dreadnoughtus. Pretty cool. Couldn't tame it, obviously. Yeah. So I kept looking. Yeah, what the fuck am I doing? So I went back home using my oil, corrupted nodes I had gotten while out, and the resources I had already had to craft myself an industrial forge. In day 7. Oh god, how long is this playthrough gonna be? And with a new forge, I wanted to use it. So I went out to tame things. Sorry. I meant was being a procrastinative little shit and wasted my time taming things. Heading to the snow dome to try and get some more Udis for kibble, where I was able to find a pretty decent one, waiting for it to get off its murder boner, knocking it out and then taming it, and then another, which had a child. Loyalty test, kill your kid. Next, I wanted to get an Oviraptor, wanting to grind for the kibble operation as soon as possible. So I went back to the city in search, looking in the area where I had started, and wandered out of the sanctuary out of boredom, wandering my way to the Desert Dome, where I found a level 145 Velonosaur, which I tamed, and chat wanted me to name Gabosaur. Sure, why not? And now content with taming, I decided to stop procrastinating and actually head out on that metal run, heading back home, gathering Plug, Crunk, and Sky to go and do it, saddling Finger, and then heading out, where in the wasteland I found some metal, only to get sidetracked by the grounds. Bones. Hundreds of thousands of millions of bones scattered the ground like an ocean. Carcasses from man and beast alike. Incomprehensible death. It honestly left me astonished, and is a really creative and amazing subtle design choice, which I have to applaud Wildcard for, and honestly is kinda just haunting when you take 5 seconds to think about it. Anyway, Rock goes, good job. So thus I went around getting as much metal as I could manage, scouring the wastelands for it, harvesting all the way into day 8, where I found a swarm of corrupted Terras, which were kind of fucking terrifying. What in the Lord of the fucking Flies is that shit? What the fuck is this shit? I kinda wanna go kill it. Yeah, oh! Watch as I disintegrate them. And after a long haul of getting as much metal as possible, I decided it was time to pack up and head home, making my way there, where I found something kind of weird in the air. They are dodgeable, I mean, I am aware that they are dodgeable. What the fuck am I looking at right there? What is that? What are you? The fuck are you? It's my ass! What the fuck is my ass doing in the middle of the air? Bro, my ass is in the middle of the air. That's my ass! What the hell? Getting back to put away 37,000 raw metal, which for some reason my metal conversion rate was 1-to-1 rather than 2-to-1, so I would be getting 37,000 metal ingots. Yeah, that's not busted at all. But the grinding wasn't done yet, as I went around base crafting narcotics, spark powder, and then heading out with Raz and Sky to try and get a bunch of crystal from the city streetlights, which worked terrifically, getting an insane amount of crystal electronics as I harvested, getting back to base with an enormous stash in day 9, which with this new cache, I went about about fashioning together the foundational structures for what I planned to be the farm, using the crystal to put together the greenhouse walls and ceiling, and then placing them to complete the basic structure of the farm, which then I realized that I would need a dung beetle for fertilizer. But there was a storm out in the wasteland, so instead I went around the city looking for an oviraptor, which eventually I managed to find one, also finding some armadillos, which I decided to try and take a crack at taming, having done some research on how to do so. However, I failed, and just went and knocked out the oviraptor just to remember I needed eggs. So I had to go home, breed some eggs with the Uties, and then head back to the tank. Taming it, where I decided to take yet another crack at the armadillos, testing out the method on a lower level one, which involved dropping a piece of meat on the ground, waiting for it to sniff it and eat it, and then petting it, which, word for the wise, mutton does not work. And successfully taming that one, I tried to get the higher level one, which was successful, naming them Angel after my IRL Peppo. And with these new companions, I went and played around with what they could do, finding it was somewhat useful, but honestly, I didn't really care for it and never really used it. Which then I went out to the sulfur fields, which is where I could find a dung beetle, where after a bit of searching, I was able to find 2 of them, adding them to my ranks and then heading back to base. Dropping off my tames and then heading straight back out to continue the taming spree, finding another decent RG near the King Titan's lair, which after the taming of the bird, I decided to play around with some of the corrupted creatures near the entrance, trying to see if I could kill a corrupted Giga. In the end, I killed 3. Day 10, I had found myself near the sunken forest, where I ended up finding a pretty decent tickle turkey on a metal outcrop over the drop, and figuring, why not, I went about taming it, and never naming it. You know what? You all name it. Top comment for a name for the theory will get to name it and get a shout out in a short. So with that, I went back out, finding another RG, taming that, and killing another enraged Rex. Neat. Oh, and I found my first Carchar, though it was level 10.
I'ma deck you in the schnoz.
Back at home, I went ahead and used some crystal to make myself some balls of the cryo variety, preparing for the many taming sprees I would go on. And I also decided to use some of them to clean up base a little bit as things were starting to get crowded. Then heading out for said taming sprees, where I found that dreadmares were spawning, so I went around killing some to see if I could get one, which in day 11 I managed to find a level 130, and doing some research on how to tame it, I went and killed it. No, don't worry, this is how you actually tame it. You see, you need to kill it, as this hell spawn tames by proving yourself worthy, where when you kill it, it will give you an altar which can be placed, which when you do, it will ask for a tribute to consume, and when you give it, it will summon the Dreadmare, which will fight you, and your goal is to keep killing it, repeating this process until it submits, which I managed to do with few hiccups, naming my new Hell Stallion Nightmare, taking some time to test out my new steed, finding it kind of weak, but in earnest, I didn't really want it for its strength, but rather its abilities. Heading back home to put the Dreadmare's Black Hole ability to use, grabbing my Rue and heading out to go on a massive berry run, collecting a ton with Sis, finishing the berry run where I used Nightmare's ability Black Hole to put the Rue in a pocket dimension for easy transport, bringing it home to find everything in its inventory still there, unlike a cryopod. Which with this new cache of Narca berries, I went about crafting some more drugs for subjugation. Which while I was out, I had also managed to get a decent amount of rare flowers, which would be needed to tame a bee, getting some ghillie gear and then heading out to the sunken forest in search. However, much like Aberration, the bees were eluding me. But thankfully, gotchas were not, managing to tame my very first one, though I tamed it with random junk in my inventory, causing its taming effectiveness to be dog shit. But a gotcha is still a gotcha. Then heading back out on the search for the bee, where I went looking, and looking, and looking, and some more looking, and some more looking, and some more looking, and still searching into day 12, and still found nothing. So, yeah, I decided to give up on looking in the sunken forest, and went to the city to try and find some among the skyscrapers, where yet again, there were still none to be found. And I question you, Ark, why the fuck can't I not have a bee? Give me my bee! So I ended up calling it a lost cause and gave up on the search. And whilst I was exhausted from the searching, work was still to be done. So I went about crafting a chemistry bench at home, along with a generator and a wind turbine to power it and my future installations. And it wouldn't hurt to give myself an indie grill, as Yujiro Obama canonically eats 100,000 calories an hour to sustain his godlike physique. Oh, and it would be useful because the wastelands make you hungrier. Yeah, that makes more sense. Setting up my new gacha as well, making it produce oil. What the fuck? Who's calling me? Yeah, I found a way to get oil without drilling. No, I need it. What the fuck? Which at this point, my loot goblin was starting to claw out of my chest. So I decided to try and find my first orbital supply drop, or OSD as I will be referring to it for the rest of the video. Heading out in search of keeping my eyes out for a Giga, as they would be crucial for defeating this map. Though at this point, I was not actually aware of where they actually spawned, so I ended up wasting a bunch of time looking at spots where they didn't spawn. And while I was looking near the snow dome, I managed to find a decent Daedon. So I went ahead and tamed that sucker up, figuring it could be useful in the future. But eventually, I lost my patience, and I actually did some research on where they spawned, finding that they only spawned on the border of the snow dome for some reason. So I went there to try and find some, using a strat to force spawns. I call it genocide, rhymes with progress. Which I went about doing this until I was halted by a meteor storm. Thanks, Ark. Heading back home to avoid it, where I went about tidying up my home and getting some things ready for the kibble operation. Finally getting a cage set up for my Oviraptor. Then heading out with Raz for a stone run, needing some stone for crop plots, but mainly to fuel my future crafting of cementing paste and spark powder. Bashing tons of rocks until day 13, packing up where I decided to go and get some treasure chests from the maps I had got, which I am so thankful I did, because from the first one I opened, I got a godlike Ascendant Longneck, which honestly is, I'm not even capping, is the best rifle I have ever in my almost 4,000 hours playing Ark that I have ever gotten, though the rest of the chests were kinda mid. Heading back home with my spoils and stone, I then went about going on a wood run with my new tickle turkey, saddling them up and heading to the outside edge of the city to get a shit ton of wood. Getting a ton of wood that I would probably use to burn. Deforestation. And it goes without saying, but I was burning it for charcoal to get gun ammunition because I'm American. We should all know this by now. Though the forge was a little full, so I went ahead and made some vaults for storage. A few for personal storage and one right next to the forge to port the metal over into. Now with the charcoal in production, I would thusly need the spark powder, which itself would need flint. So I grabbed Crunk and Nightmare to head out on a flint run. And I'm not gonna lie, I used slow-mo cheats. Yeah, the Yankee was too slow for me. My attention span was just melting in my lap. So I use slow-mo, but like, is it really that bad? And I mean, if you really don't like it, get in the streams and tell me not to, because if you're not in the streams telling me not to, then you have no place to tell me what I do and what I don't when it comes to such a minor cheat like slow-mo, and get off my back! Or encourage me to. I don't know, whatever floats your boat. Anyways, I went about speeding through the collection, eventually finishing on day 14. Heading back home and using this new deposit of flint and stone, as yeah, Yankees get that too, to make a bunch of spark powder, which also meant that the stone from Raz could be saved for cementing paste, so that was efficient. Though, now with some grinding done, I decided to head back out on the look for Gigas, as with every day that passed and I hadn't found one day came closer to not being able to fight the Titans, so yeah, I needed to get that straight pretty quick. Heading out around the Snow Dome to continue the spawn forcing strategy, where I didn't really find anything. No Gigas, no Carchars, but I did manage to find a decent Beauty, which more eggs couldn't hurt. Oh, and there's a good RG too, so don't mind if I do that. But no matter how long I searched, how many things I killed, how many times I went around the dome, I had yet to still find a Giga. Though I did manage to find a decent Stego, which looked pretty cool, so I went ahead and tamed that and its children. These guys will never be mentioned again. And I went on, looking and losing my fucking patience, so I went ahead and ventured into the Snow Dome for another Managarmr, attempting to tame a level 85, but it didn't still, and my aim was still dog shit, so I didn't hit it, and I just gave up on that one. Finding a level 135 mana later, which I decided to try and tame this one, which that went abysmally, being the most cancerous tame I had ever endured on this game. The thing jumping around like a toddler on crack, where I couldn't hit it, and when I did hit it, it jumped across the whole damn biome. And then it got stuck in the air, which made it invincible for some reason, and then I completely lost track of it, and ended up knocking out a completely different mana that was level 140, somehow. And I didn't even realize it, but alas, that chaos was finished, as I managed to knock it out, and tame my second Managarmr on day 15, naming them Reingar. So with that, I went out looking for another one, but failed, so I ended up leaving the Snow Dome and went about leveling my new companion, getting an explorer note in the city, and then going around killing creatures and some enraged Rexes. And to test my new companion's strength, I went about trying to kill a corrupted Giga as well, which went not so great, so I just went back to killing enraged Rexes, finishing up leveling and taking them back home so they could heal. Throwing out the other tames that I had gotten, and trying to heal Reingar manually with picks, but I got bored of that pretty quick. Focusing on the fact that my gacha was still not producing crystals, even though I had given it pellets, which I found out was because it needed some actual food, like stone, in order to produce anything. Which, giving it some, it immediately went about producing me my crystals, which after some cleaning, I went back out with Finger to keep on looking for Gigas. Going about the process of killing to clear spawns, going on about it for a long time, so I did some research to try and help me figure out how to make that easier, which while doing that, a Carchar spawned, though it was level 50, so with the broken heart, I went about killing it. Returning to my searching, and looking, and killing, and some more killing, finding nothing, until a viewer eventually recommended that I should try and get a mod to increase spawns, which is exactly what I did. Getting a Giga spawn mod, which theoretically would spawn more Gigas, and have them spawn in more places tied to the Dreadnoughtus spawns, which were all over the wastelands. So I went out to search, and unfortunately the mod did not help at fucking all. As I went clearing spawns around the Snow Dome for a profusely long time, going into day 16, changing my strat to go look into the wastelands, and still finding nothing. A few Dreadnoughtuses, but no Gigas. So absolutely exhausted, I went about taking on a blue OSD drop to try and get some loot instead, using Rudy and Finger, which while the defense was relatively easy, it was extremely lengthy, as the corrupted creatures still got stuck, just like on ASE. And the blue rings, which Wildcard added to help you find them, only showed up when you were looking at them. Genius move, guys. This is totally fucking helpful. And it didn't help that I accidentally bit the drop several times, but slowly, and I mean very slowly, I managed to beat the drop, only getting some meager loot as my rewards. God damn it, Ark. Though because the blue drop was very easy, I decided to head out looking for a higher level one to try and beat for some better loot, heading out into the wastelands in search, scouring the whole place over, breaking a blue drop and still not finding anything, so I detoured back to Giga searching, keeping in mind that new mod. Yet I had found none of those and eventually found a red drop, which I decided to take a crack at doing. And to say for sure, the red drop was far more chaotic than the blue drop, the massive corrupted creatures swarming in rapidly, but thankfully Rudy was able to handle it. So slowly I went about cutting through the mass horde of creatures to defeat the drop, waiting for stragglers, which slowed me down even more, continuing into day 17, where I had almost finished the drop, only waiting for a few stuck stragglers until the sky turned purple, and figuring that if those rats hadn't gotten stuck, and honestly out of impulse, I went ahead and did a dino wipe to beat the drop and collect my loot, only for the sky to turn yellow, indicating that it wasn't a meteor storm, meaning that I did that for no reason. Regardless, I was able to get myself some pretty decent loot, getting some of the new equipment traits from Bob's Tall Tales, I think, and a pretty decent pump shotgun to boot. And realizing that the storm wasn't actually all that dangerous, I went out looking for Gigas again, though that dino wipe most likely broke the spawn, so I went out looking only to find nothing. Going around and around, clearing out spawns only to find even more nothing. Even doing some extra research to assist me, learning that it would probably be easier if I chose a small segment of the spawns to repeatedly cleanse over and over. And figuring out which creatures exactly spawned in the same place as the Giga, and the rarity of those spawns. Much thanks to Ross Clark, where I found out that the Giga wasn't even the rarest thing on the border spawns. In fact, Rexes and Uties were even rarer. And I had already found a couple of those, by the way, which was a nasty salt blotch in the wound of my ego. Which I also learned that Gigas and Carchars share the same spawn, which means I could only get one or the other, making Gigas even more rare. Alas, with no choice, I went around doing the spawn clearing. Over and over and over and over and over again, still failing, and deducing that it was probably the mod making them outspawn, so I got rid of it and went back to looking, and looking, and looking, and we've done this rodeo. I killed, cleared spawns, kept on looking, and didn't find shit. Until I was able to get a Carchar to spawn, which it was level 100, good enough to tame. So I decided to try and tame it the frankly stupid way, which went about as well as you could expect. So I went back home to go fashion together a trap, getting the components and heading back to successfully trap my new Carchar, going about the process of feeding her, and eventually getting its trust, where I then went out with her to go on a killing spree to finally tame it, doing just that and naming her Renegade. But now with that tamed, I now needed to find more Gigas, so I had to go back to my strategy, looking into day 18 and still not finding one. So I decided to head home and give the spawns a little time to breathe, going about some grinding and getting my new Carchar a sap, crafting some gunpowder with the charcoal and spark powder I had been producing, and healing up Reingar, which by proxy I had learned a new method to get a bunch of pellets, as the passive method wasn't really working. Then crafting myself some legendary trank darts to pair with my legendary rifle, which with these new darts and Renegade saddle, I went out into the wastelands out on the look to do something fun, which that turned out to be an alpha element vein, which I went about defending with Renegade, which for some reason was actually easier than a red drop, clearing through the waves of corrupted and slowly carving my way to victory, claiming the element node for myself and getting almost 600 element as my reward. Which is a bonus, it was a really good way to level Renegade, getting her pretty strong and proving to be a very powerful comrade. And I should stipulate that this was actually my first time using a decent Carchar ever, which she proved to be even more so useful as I went around on a killing spree, getting a ton of resources and getting bitched down by a Dreadnoughtus, where I eventually made my way to the Snow Dome, and with this new mighty steed, I went about using her strength and speed to go about the spawn clearing method for Gigas, which while it still took forever, going on killing and killing and killing and looking into day 19, still finding nothing by the way, the pain was cured by how fun it was to ride a Carchar, though I ended up getting myself killed jumping off Renegade. So I decided to switch to Reingar for a little bit, going over the area again and 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 again, where I did manage to find a Carchar, but it was level 15. Come on, man! So I killed it with Renegade and went out looking again, clearing spawns again, and more spawns again, and more spawns again. And going on for so long, I had managed to get a Tech Rex to spawn on the border spawn, where Rexes only had a 6% chance to spawn, where in of itself, a Tech variant would only have a 5% chance to spawn per Rex spawn, meaning that this Tech Rex would only have a 0.3 3% chance to spawn, compared to a Giga's 12% chance. But eventually I did manage to get a Giga to spawn, though it was only level 15. But with how rare Gigas were proving themselves to be, I went ahead and tamed it anyways, as a Giga is better than no Giga. And then went back to grinding. Fucking I hate this. Where I came across a decent Rex while searching, so I decided, why not? And went about taming it, which then I went back to looking. Yeah, do I need to say anything? Though, my work paid off, as I finally found another Giga that was level 140, knocking it out in haste and taming it, naming them the Lord of Death, and finding that it had some amazing stats too. But I would still need a better female, so I went back to grinding. But at this point, I had done so much of that I'd kinda gotten numb to it, finding another Rex which I decided to tame as well. And I actually managed to get another Giga to spawn, which it was only a marginally better female than the one I had gotten so far, but it was still an improvement, so I went about taming it, then finding a decent RG which I also tamed, and then another in day 20. Though after a while more searching, I had grown completely exhausted of looking, so I decided to pack it up. Heading home, planning to take what Ark had given me and just breed up the levels of the babies to get a proper breeding pair of Gigas with what I had. Getting home, where I went about putting up my new stuff and began the breeding operation for the Gigas, and gathering together the best of the RGs that I had gotten so far and starting up their breeding operation as well. Collecting eggs as they were laid and hatching them out, getting incrementally better Gigas and disposing of the not so better ones, which one of the RG babies managed to get a mutation, bearing new purple feathers and a melee mutation to spice up the Legion's strength. So I went about trying to push that into the new line of babies, working on some crafting while I was doing all this, crafting some gunpowder and collecting me some of the good crystals from the gachas, which these were feeding my loot goblin quite well. Eventually getting a perfect replica of the Lord of Death and a female baby Giga, which made all the other Gigas pointless. But since they aided me into getting to this point, I went ahead and just cryoed them and put them away, where I continued to work towards breeding for the RGs, attempting to merge the mutation onto the next generation, however most of them failed. Where I also decided to imprint the new female baby Giga, which made her extremely powerful, at full imprint gaining her a total of 43,000 health, which was significantly stronger than anything else I had at the time. Knowing that I would be breeding countless generations of Gigas and carnivorous offspring for a while, I went out with Renegade to go on a killing spree, going around the sanctuary, killing all that I could for as much meat as I could manage, cleansing all the way into day 21, getting a decent enough supply which I took home to fill the troughs, stealing some of it to feed Mr. Bobma, which the new baby Giga had fully grown up, so I set her up for breeding.
I don't wanna fuck, Draco.
That's too damn bad!
Going about the breeding of Gigas and completely ignoring the RGs out of laziness, hatching out babies while I went about crafting some new infrastructure for the base, getting myself a steam forge which I could actually put to use here on Extinction, a makeshift mega lab to replace the chem benches, an embryo incubator, thinking it was just a different kind of egg incubator for some reason, and an industrial cooker which I would use for kibble, if I ever found that bee. And after hatching out another Giga, I decided that while waiting for it to grow up, that I would turn my attention to some much needed grinding, heading out with Sky and Raz to go on a chunky stone run which I needed for cementing paste. Not before realizing that I would also need a lot of chitin as well, but I actually had a plan for that. I decided that with my Megatherium Sadie, I would head out to the Desert Dome and search for the Desert Titan Cave, which I knew from ASC that there would be a ton of bugs in there, which I eventually found in the cave and realized that she was kinda low, so I went back home and got some firepower to assist me in clearing the cave, getting me my straps, and heading back to the cave to actually run it, which went lovely as Sadie shredded through everything and my gun served well to take out the Arthropluras, which was mainly what I feared. Running the cave on a killing spree, getting a ton of chitin, finding the artifact as well, claiming my very first one of the playthrough, the Artifact of Chaos. Man, that's actually raw as hell. Then making my way to the terminal, where I decided to take a peek at what the tribute requirements for the Desert Titan, which were 100 Corrupted Hearts, 10 Fire Talons, 10 Sarco Scales, and the artifact which I held in my pocket. So that was a shopping list. But eventually I left the cave in day 22, having gathered over 100,000 chitin, plenty enough to feed my massive need for cementing paste. So I went home with my collection, though now I would need an ungodly amount of stone, almost 200,000's worth in total. But you know what, that's gonna be a problem for later. Making myself another chem bench, I went about using some of the stone that I already had to craft a decent starting amount of cementing paste, putting away the rest of the chitin into sale for future production. With that settled for now, I returned back to the Giga breeding operation, hatching some eggs that I've been collecting, deciding to put some serious time into actually grinding them out, as I would need a lot of them for the battles ahead. And I also learned while offline that the new bio grinder that came with Extinction's Bob Talltails editions could give me kibble if I grind up creatures. Yeah, we finna do that rather than get a bee. Crafting and placing the grinder where I was gonna make the farm, then going about hatching Yudi eggs, as I figured they would give me extraordinary kibble, ripping the farm ceiling off and sending the children to oblivion for kibble. Yeah, I'm going to hell for this one. But from their dead corpses, I was able to get my very first bit of kibble, and now proving viable, I continued the hatching of Yudi eggs, taking the brand new infants, throwing them in a ball, and then chucking said ball into the grinder to sacrifice them for taming Mining Craft, and then repeating the process. Taking care of the Gigas that I had already hatched, not hatching more as I fixated on the Uties for a little bit, committing these heinous sins until my loot goblin wanted to commit some different ones. So I went out to look for some decent OSDs, taking Renegade and saddling the first female Giga replica that I had gotten, naming her Cersei, and then heading out to try and find a drop. Pretty quickly finding a legendary drop, which I figured, why the hell not? Using Cersei for the first time, finding that she was over fucking powered, though the creatures that swarmed in were strong themselves, and slowly they began to chip away at her health. And while I was more than powerful enough to handle the swaths of creatures, the drop was suffering, especially since Cersei often hit the drop with potent force. In fact, the drop took more damage from me rather than the waves of creatures, and slowly as the waves of corrupted swarmed in, the lower her health fell and the closer the drop came to death, as I could not stop biting it on accident. Dear God, that's so fucking annoying. Where I had managed to get to wave 5 on day 23, though a lodged Carno ended up making me hit the drop a couple times, and brought it to the brink of death. And not aware, I tried to end the drop, but I couldn't, because in fact, I could only end it at level 8. So I went about trying to claw my way there, though the hordes began to overwhelm and I couldn't stop hitting the damn drop, so on wave 7, it unfortunately died. On the bright side, I was at the very least able to level Cersei and prove her absolute might from the ordeal. Paired with some decent yielding of tributes and corrupted nodes, I could walk away at least a little satisfied. Returning home in defeat, I decided that my base needed an expansion. With all those new appliances, my current abode would not be able to house it all, so I decided to use the leftover stone I had to build a stone compound, heading out with Nightmare and the Theory to go on a wood run, getting a hefty supply of that, and then bringing Sadie out for thatch collection for some reason, realizing that was stupid. So I went and got my Megaloceros, going about the harvesting for thatch, which I spotted a gorgeous max level Carno, which I couldn't pass up and decided to tame. Say with me now, this creature will never be mentioned again. Wrapping up the thatch run and returning home to plan out the construction of the base, which took me a minute because I didn't know exactly what the hell I was doing. But eventually I opted to build out from the ledge which my upper base sat atop, building a freeform structure which nestled itself in the framework of the platform itself was nestled upon, which I know that doesn't do a great job of explaining it, so if you're confused, trust me, I am too. Just watch, you'll see what I'm doing. Let me cook. Laying out the foundation and building up the structure going into day 24. Finishing up the outer structure, which I say looked pretty decent. Don't know what to call it, but it works, I guess. Which with that completed, I went about furnishing my new crafting warehouse, where I also placed a cliff platform and Extinction's new tribe tower, which for single players sucked nut, because the buffs it provided, while really good, would only activate fully after 30 real life days. Yeah, I'm not doing that on this playthrough. Heading inside to place the embryo incubator, realizing it wasn't for eggs. 0 for 2 so far. Then placing the steam forge, the indie cooker, which I didn't need anymore, an industrial preserving bin, which I never used, the makeshift mega lab, and then some extra vaults for storage, completing my furnishing. Though, in hindsight, of the 7 things I crafted, only 2 would ever prove useful. This was a complete waste of fucking resources. What the hell was I thinking? Though I did have some leftover stone, which I decided to use to test out the mega lab, getting some chitin and crafting a decent stash of cementing paste. No, get the fuck away from my video, you damn. I also learned that with this new structure, you could respec dino levels, which I never personally used, but actually is an extremely useful feature. Which then I decided to return to my kibble operations. Yeah, Ark, you really fucked for this, I can't lie. Yes, I know I'm doing it, but Ark's making me. It won't give me a B. So I went about trying to hatch a ton of Udy eggs at one time, which I'm pretty sure my Xbox was screaming for mercy as I waited for the eggs to hatch, which they did in spectacular and laggy fashion, which it took me a good minute to clean up the mess of newborns, but in the end it was funny as fuck, which I could confidently say that I wouldn't need any more eggs, so I stopped the Udy breeding before sacrificing a bunch of children to the machine. So I went about doing that, grinding 93 baby Udys to only get 73 kibble. Yeah, it's worth it. Day 25, and I wanted to put my steam forge to use. So in Nightmare, Crunk, and Sky, I went out on a metal run, heading up to the Wasteland Mountains to find some, where in ASE there was a ton of metal here, but it seems ASA nerfed the spot, which shot dead my plans. So I ended up scouring the wastelands for any metal I could find, going all over the map and slowly but surely eventually getting a healthy amount, which I went and brought home. Though I had gotten a ton of metal, which I didn't really want to have to deal with putting away, which gave me the idea to get the Survivor Mate, not aware of how they truly work. But for that I would need 100 black pearls, which to get those, there were only 2 methods. The hard way, which was to go out and kill a bunch of large corrupted fauna, or the maybe hard way of getting a black pearl gacha. So I decided to gather my owl picks and head out with Reingar to try both methods, where I came across a returning mod, Amororex. Yes, these hell spawns were back again, and curiosity, ego, got me, so I tried to kill it with Reingar's Ice Breath, which stun-locked the Moro, allowing me to kill them effortlessly. You have finally been avenged, my Spinos! Then going into the King Titan's lair to test out the first method, murder spree. Going out with Cersei to slaughter the natives. It's okay, it's fine, they're purple, it's okay. Grinding away into day 26, where I eventually wrapped up with 101 black pearls and 117 corrupted hearts, which I'll take the time real quick to paint a picture for how many I would actually need for this playthrough. See, each base titan needed 100 corrupted hearts to summon. To beat the Alpha King Titan, I would need to fight them 3 times for their heads, then a 4th to tame each one of them, meaning just off the base titans, I would need to accrue 1,200 corrupted hearts to summon, kill, and tame each of them, which does not include the 750 hearts you need in total to fight every variation of the King Titan. Yeah, it's gonna be a grindy one. Now as for the second method, gotchas. Heading down to the sunken forest in search for my stone fat fuffs. Finding a group of them where with picks, I forced them to puke up their intestines for pellets, and went about taming a level 125 gotcha that I had found, getting them and naming them Fuffer, though unfortunately this mother Fuffer did not give me any black pearls, only the silicon variety. So to try and save myself time whilst trying to get a BP gotcha, yes, I'm too lazy to keep typing out black pearls, don't judge me you fuckers, you don't have to write 23,000 words for one fucking video. So I went about taming a low level one, to still not get black pearls. So with that defeat, and not wanting to tame anymore, I went ahead and left the sunken forest to find a meteor storm had started. So I ran through the hellscape as quick as I could to get back to the sanctuary, getting back home to set up the new gotchas and craft me that survivor mate, just to learn that it in fact could not take materials out of a dino's inventory, which was my entire plan. But I was able to make it at least a little bit useful, telling it to take cooked metal out of the steam forge and to put it away into the vaults. So it wasn't a complete waste. Then going about manually collecting owl pellets from my new gotchas as I really wanted my gamble crystals. And with the steam forge a churning, I now wanted to fixate on the progression to the tech phase of Ark, which to do so I would need to kill a titan, which for that I would need a Giga army. So with all the Gigas I had produced so far, I went about setting them up for breeding out the army. Though to maximize efficiency, I would need another Oviraptor. So I went out looking for one, finding one near the stadium only to kill it. So I went back out looking, but even into day 27, the egg addict eluded me. So I gave up on looking and just moved my current Oviraptor into a better spot and thusly began the breeding operation, which to aid me, I decided to establish a dedicated raising area on the side of the base, putting down some feeding troughs which needed to be filled with meat, and needing to wait for eggs to lay anyways, I decided to head out to try and find an OSD to run for meat, finding a red drop which I went about defending, slowly. Man, I really hate these fucking stragglers. And because of how strong Cersei had become, I ended up accidentally killing the drop, which was totally a skill issue, but I decided to blame it on Gigas, so I wanted to get a Carchar instead to run OSDs, even though they would probably have the same exact problem. Ain't I a fucking genius? But alas, I went out to the snow dome in search for them, utilizing my forced spawn method and going on a killing spree, which at least I was still getting meat. Though a meteor storm started, so I was forced into the safety of the snow dome, which put my search to a halt. So while I was there, I decided to try and see if I could find a Moro, figuring maybe they would be good for OSDs too, where I wasn't able to find one. But I did take a crack at taming a Mana, that Renegade didn't like. Are you fucking kidding me? And eventually I did find that Moro, but it was ass cheeks, so I went ahead and just killed it with Renegade. And the meteor shower subsided on day 28. And hooked on the idea of a Moro, I decided to venture out into the wastelands to search. Though, while they were quite common, none of them were good enough to justify taming, so I ended up wandering my way back to the snow dome for Carchas, where I ended up finding a decent level Enki, so I tamed it, and never used it. Then, getting distracted by Moros again, I went around looking, attempting to kill one, but had a terrifying scare where it knocked me off Reingar. Luckily, Cersei was in my pocket, and she was able to handle that abomination with ease. And with that, and some other poor level ones, I finally gave up on the idea and just went back home with my haul of meat, putting it away into the troughs and beginning the hatching of the Legion, which took 10 minutes to hatch per batch. So I used the in-between time to collect more owl pellets for my gamble crystals, multitasking between doing that and taking care of the newborn Gigas, getting them imprinted, and then going back to my gamble addiction, taking care of the babies, condemning the failures, and hatching the second wave of babies on day 29. And then did the same thing all over again. Get used to it, guys, we have a lot more of this to do. And then again with a third wave of Gigas, imprinting them, doing some crafting in between, gambling, and then making a bunch of saddles for them when they grew up, eventually imprinting the last of the Gigas, which as a reward, I went out for a treasure chest. Oh, fuck you too, Ark. Yet, we weren't done yet, as I would need to level all these guys up. So, taking them as a whole in cryos, getting their saddles, I went out on the look for an explorer note to assist me in the process, which I got stuck on doing this for an embarrassing amount of time, finding that the coords that I was using to find the note were from ASE, and did not correlate well on ASA, so y'all be aware of that. But finally getting the note on day 30, I went about doing the leveling run, first trying to kill a Dreadnoughtus, which went surprisingly well actually. The Giga being able to tank attacks, and me being able to easily avoid them to bring down the titanic adversary in good fashion. And then I went on to go kill some enraged Rexes, knowing a spot where they spawned pretty often, where I switched to my next Giga, and found that they had 60 levels already, where this was where I learned that my cryos gave my creatures passive EXP, meaning the Legion was already already pretty much leveled, me only needing to allocate the levels. So I went ahead and threw them all out at once and decided to have some fun going on a killing spree, bullying a bunch of enraged Rexes, which eventually I wrapped up and packed up all the Legion but one, my new main, which I had named Devastator. But then I found another Dreadnoughtus, so I brought the gang back out for the slaughter, which with the Legion ready and complete, I went on to my next task, getting the tributes necessary for the Ice Titan, as that's the one I wanted to beat to get the Tech Replicator and the Tech Force Field engrams, which in truth is why I wanted Tech at all, as I wanted to use a Force Field to aid in my looting and to help me tame a Dreadnoughtus. Which, to find out what I needed, I went to the Ice Cave, finding a low-level Carchar on the way, and then running the cave with Renegade, fighting my way through a Comic-Con of furries, and finding my way through the cave to collect my second artifact, the Void. Then heading to the terminal to find that the Ice Titan needed 100 hearts, just like the Desert Titan, and 10 Theory Claws, 10 Spinosails, and the artifact. Thankfully, I had most of those tributes, so I left the cave in day 31 to collect the few I needed, passing by a really good Dreadnoughtus, dropping by base to find in fact that I already had all the tributes. So with that already done, I went to the Snow Dome to go set up my Legion of Gigas, only to get distracted by a Carchar, which was level 115 and male. A perfect match for Renegade. So I went ahead and trapped the guy and went about the taming process. Though this guy was being a bit more of a pain than Renegade was, refusing to eat some things and not being able to eat others. And when it did eat, it broke my good gloves, so I had to use some shitty hide ones, which I would regret, as when I fed it another time, it one-shot me. Thankfully, it remained trapped when I got back, so I was able to grab my stuff and resume taming it, just to have the same problems repeat themselves. However, I persisted through with them, and eventually managed to get his trust and went on a killing spree to finally tame my second Carchar, the father-to-be of legions. And with that done, I could go about assembling the Legion at the arena, which finishing that up, I delved down to the ice cave, running through it and coming to the terminal. Here on day 31, I would fight my first Titan, summoning the Titanic Ice Monstrosity. Though I found that I was woefully overprepared and ended up killing it in moments. Yeah, that was easier than anticipated. But with that, I was able to learn my very first tech grams and get myself a decent chunk of loot, including some amazing tech rifles. And now with these tech grams, I wanted to get my hands on that force field. But for that, I would need the replicator, which both of these would need around 300 black pearls. And as I hadn't gotten a black pearl gacha yet, I only had one recourse: to kill a bunch of corrupted creatures. Which, to help me in that, I wanted to get a really good Carchar, so I went about breeding the new Carchar with Renegade to get some babies. And also getting pellets for gamble crystals, which I'm gonna say it now, if I'm breeding, I'm most likely doing this as well. Going about trying to get a really good baby, breeding through generations, where I was able to get a perfect baby Carchar with a mutation, which while it was a food mutation, it made the baby look gorgeous. So I was happy. And also found some amusement in how derpy the babies looked, deciding to name the baby Ice Pop, and went on breeding and imprinting baby Carchars into day 32, getting another mutated baby, which had a health mutation, which was amazing. And after having gotten a decent few Carchars, I thusly remembered what I was breeding these guys for, which was black pearls. So I went to the King Titan's lair and went on a killing spree. Going on this killing spree all the way into day 33, where I was still going, getting a ton of pearls and corrupted hearts with the amount I would need in mind. Eventually wrapping up my carnage, leaving the lair with a total of 347 pearls, after 2 whole hours of grinding. But I also had managed to get almost 400 corrupted hearts and 79 giga hearts, and most definitely a few thousand corrupted nodules and organic polymer to boot, so in the end it was worth it. Bringing back my haul to base, where I went about getting the next generation of Carchars breeding, wanting to get Ice Pop's colors and the health mutation into one baby, breeding them to that end, where I decided to get some treasure chests from some maps I had gotten while I was in the lair, where I was able to get some solid loot, including an absolutely OP assault rifle. Then moving on to the next task ahead, actually crafting the tech replicator, which the engram says you can make it in a fabricator, but that's a fucking lie. So while trying to figure out that problem, I went back to taking care of the Carchars, hatching out some more eggs, where I was able to get one with a stamina mutation that turned out pure blue, which was pretty. Though I had gotten some suitable replacements for the breeding rotation, which put the operation to a halt while I waited for the new babies to grow. So I went to get that replicator, finding that it could only be made in the Titan terminals on Extinction. So getting the materials, I went out to the Desert Dome to go and craft the replicator in the Desert Titan cave, going through the caverns and crafting my new replicator in day 34. Heading back home with my new crafting station, where I found the Carchar babies had grown up, so I set them up for breeding, and then placed my tech replicator. Not since the island, all the way back on ASC had I had one, and it was an honestly surreal feeling to finally have this monstrous crafting machine at my disposal once more. And settled with that, and honestly distracted as I wanted a convenient way to try and get owl pellets, being absolutely exhausted of manually collecting them, I went about trying to get a mod that would help with that, a poop trick mod that needed biotoxin to craft. So I did some research on how to get some, where in a forum I was given the impression that corrupted reapers could drop biotoxins. So I went out looking and killing some, finding in fact they did not, and that the forum person most likely confused organic polymer with biotoxin. So unfortunately I would have to settle with manual collection. So I just went about breeding out more Carchars, deciding to put some serious time into actually breeding them, as I wanted one powerful enough to run any OSDs that I wanted, hatching new babies and gathering all the resources in my base into the replicator while I was doing that, where after a few batches I managed to get a female Carchar that had attained all the mutations, stats, and colors into one perfect baby, making it a perfect female going forward, but by result made all the other babies that I had hatched pretty much useless. Alas, I went on breeding and hatching new babies, spending the interim finally crafting myself the tech force field, which was a bit more expensive than I originally anticipated, but I would need it anyways. And eventually I had gotten to the point in the Carchar breeding operation where I needed to wait for the next generation of breeders to grow up before I could continue. So I went ahead and used the spare time to go out on the look for some things to tame, mainly wanting a Pego. Now yes, I wanted this abomination, but for good reason, because in ASA they had gained a new passive ability to be able to pick up gacha crystals, which would help me with my gambling addiction by feeding into it. No, I don't have a problem. So I went to the sunken forest where I knew some could spawn, scouring through the underground caverns with Pix's thermal vision, where I ended up finding an oviraptor instead, which I knocked out, just to realize that I didn't have any eggs. Finding a level 130 and level 120 gacha in my searches, which I went about taming the both of them, sadly finding that neither of them produced black pearls, which is the main reason why I even tamed them in the first place, but you know what, fuck it. Which after I had tamed the level 120, a Pego attacked me, and instead of taming it, I decided to kill it and steal its child, because yes, that's what a rational person does. No, officer, there were never any signs. Finally leaving the caverns on day 35, returning home to find the next generation ready, so I went ahead and continued my Carchar breeding operation, immediately getting a replacement male, which halted progress again. Well, with some extra time on my hands, I went out with Nightmare and Technic to go on a berry run for some narcotics, heading out to the marsh area in the middle of the city just to find that the stego wasn't as effective here as I wanted. So I went back and got Sis instead, using them to harvest a ton of berries. Though while doing so, a prompt gave me a horrifying message. The King Titan had spawned in the wasteland, which was the perfect opportunity to test out my Legion's strength. So I went home to grab my Giga army, heading out to locate the monster, finding the monster Shadow King on day 36. Throwing out my Legion, I hurried to prepare for combat, marching towards this titanic foe, which the clash began, and my Legion melted through its health immediately, bolstering my confidence as soon enough the Wandering King fell into ashes. My Legion stood victorious, though I didn't get a reward from it for some reason, so that kinda sucked. So I went back home, finding that the baby Carchar had grown up. So once more, the Carchar breeding was back on. Though I kinda wanted an oviraptor to expedite the process, so I grabbed some eggs and went out with pigs to look around the sanctuary for some, which unfortunately I failed in that endeavor, and failed some more as I tried to tame a sleeping Zaldir dragon, coming to find that I would need some ovis, which they would need veggie cakes for, and that would need a farm, which I already dismantled plans for, so that really wasn't gonna be an option. Going back home to resume the Carchar breeding, taking some time to put those berries I had gotten to use, and made a bunch of narcotics, using what I had crafted of narcotics to fashion together some more legendary trank darts. Which, after some more Carchar breeding, I went ahead and went back down to the sunken forest to try and find some oviraptors since I couldn't find any in the city. Searching over the area with Pix's thermal vision, where quickly I managed to find some. A parent with some babies. Perfect. Except I accidentally killed the parent while trying to knock it out. So I just had to make do with the babies, collecting 2 of them with some struggle, and then heading back home with my mission a success. Setting up a cage for one of the new oviraptors, putting the other one away and completely forgetting about it for the rest of the playthrough, where during my breeding, I was able to substitute one of the females from the breeding operation, one which I decided to take for my own, naming her Rush, but I wanted to wait for the baby replacement to grow up, and for a stockpile of eggs to be built before I could pocket her. Now with the breeding automated, I decided to put that new force field to use, heading out with Renegade in a pocket to find a Dreadnoughtus and an Alpha Vein, as the process of taming a Dreadnoughtus involved luring it to an element vein so it could feed on it, which while feeding, you would have to defend it from corrupted fauna just like you would a drop or a vein itself. So I went out on day 37 to look for one, finding a trash Dreadnoughtus, which I decided to kill to test Reingar's strength, where after taking some concerning damage, I was able to subdue and kill it. Later passing by a decent male Dreadnoughtus near the city, but with no good veins nearby, I would just have to bookmark it for later, continuing my search for a good vein or another Dreadnoughtus. However, even looking into day 38, I failed to find either, and with the meteor storm beginning, I went home to continue my breeding of the Carchars. Heading back out when the storm subsided, delving into the wastelands for a laborious search, for no matter how many corrupted creatures I killed, no matter how many Dreadnoughtus, good or bad, that I found, no matter how far I leapt with Reingar, I failed to find a good enough element vein to tame one. Until finally, just southwest of the Snow Dome, I managed to find an Alpha Vein, which was very close to one of the good Dreadnoughtus that I've already found prior. So, with glee, I used my Carchar to lure the Titan in close to the element vein to save element, getting it just close enough to start until I realized that I had left the force field at home. So I dropped by base, collected the force field and some element, then heading back straight to the Alpha Vein and the Dreadnoughtus, feeding it a piece of element and luring it straight to the vein, where there the taming strategy begun. So I went about defending it, clearing through waves of creatures, kinda confused as I went about it, as there wasn't really a clear way to tell how the tame was going. But eventually, and to my surprise, I was able to tame my very first Dreadnoughtus, which the node was still there, so I went about defending it, as more element wouldn't hurt. Going about the process and slowly beating the vein in day 39, collecting my spoils of war and heading back home, putting away the element I had gotten, and fashioning a saddle for my new comrade. Then taking some time to clean up base, setting up the next generation of Carchars to breed, and then settling my titanic ally. But I wanted to put some more effort into breeding, so I went about hatching some more Carchars, where I was able to get another copy of Rush, which made me confident that the breeding operation could continue without her. So I finally took her from the rotation to be my first imprinted Carchar pocket, which also allowed me to retire Renegade. Thank you, girl, you get to rest for now. And as a gift from my new gal, I decided to craft Rush an absolutely OP saddle, using a blueprint that I had gotten while looting, which I decided to head down to the city floor with both the Dreadnoughtus and Rush to test them out. Testing out my tectonic Titan's might against the fauna of the city, finding that even a barely leveled, unimprinted Dreadnoughtus was rivaling the power of some of my strongest imprinted Gigas, which was extremely compelling, and chat asked me to name her Godzilla, which I slightly changed, naming her Gojira, finding that a little bit more befitting. Then giving her her first proper test to kill an Alpha Zaldrir dragon, clashing with the Colossal Sky Dragon and bringing it down with confidence, which gave me the confidence to try and kill a Mororex with her, the ultimate test for my new ally, finding one and beginning the challenge. Though I found while fighting it that the combination of its armor and bleed and Gojira's slow attack speed that the fight was not going my way. So I threw out Rush to support, and together we managed to bring down the bastard. So I went ahead and decided to give Gojira some rest, switching to Rush to test her power, which almost immediately she was proving mighty, almost matching Renegade's full power with minimal levels or bloodlust. So with that prospect, I wanted to put her to a true test, taking her out to a legendary OSD, placing down the force field and beginning her first true battle, which I stalled the first wave to give my force field time to raise up. However, the second wave came in anyways, as the last stragglers of the first wave were despawned from the drop defense. So I was forced to take on the waves of abomination directly. Fortunately, my force field activated soon after, and I was able to take the fight seriously, ripping through hordes with my new force of nature, going wave by wave. However, the creatures were melting the health of my force field, which they had managed to completely destroy on wave 4. So in an attempt to keep some form of defense, I decided to use some metal dino gates that I'd been using for traps, in a way to bolster the defenses for the drop, which they served well to that end, giving the drop some shielding and breaking the creature's AI, which gave me time to clear out most of them before any significant damage was done to the OSD. Though the hordes still persisted and slowly managed to start breaking the gates and press on to damage the OSD, which I tried to counter by using the time in between waves from the Lost Stragglers to try and reinforce the walls with stone gates, which did help a little bit, enough to where I was able to get to wave 10 in day 40, where the sky turned a shade of lavender, and fearing a meteor storm, I halted the drop immediately, only to find that it was a false alarm. But alas, I could relish in victory, attaining my very first legendary drop, getting a plethora of loot, including metal structures to replace the ones I had used, plenty of insane BPs, including one for a mech, some parts for a battle rig, and many other goodies. Which, feeling victorious, I went home to put away my spoils, proud of my new companion, and intrigued by the possibility of an even stronger one, as Rush proved to be one of my strongest creatures so far, which made me think what a mutated one could do. So I went about breeding even more Carchars, going on getting pellets for my addiction in the interim, where I managed to get 2 Carchars with another health mutation. Glorious! And these new mutated babies would serve well to replace the old generation. So while I waited for them to grow, I decided to put Rush's newfound might to use, taking her to the King Titan's lair to grind for tributes. Which, besides watching a Moro get bullied by the hordes, I went about the process of slaughter, clearing through walls of corrupted, leaving floors of bodies in my wake. Rush seaming through the legions of shadows like a knife through butter, and soon enough, in day 41, I was able to leave the lair with 250 black pearls and almost 300 hearts, which only took me a half an hour on Rush compared to Devastator's painstaking 2 hours for similar results. Carchars were very quickly becoming my favorite pocket juggernaut. With my spoils, I went back home, setting up the next generation of Carchars to breed, needing only to wait for them to amass a decent cache of eggs to hatch. So in the meantime, I decided to head out with Crunk, Sky, and Nightmare to head on a massive metal run once again, delving towards the sunken forest, scraping the metal around its entrance, and then heading down to get as much metal as possible. Which while down there on my metal mash session, I found some decent gachas which I went about taming, though neither had black pearls, so we will be forgetting about them. Returning to my metal collection, which went on and on and on until I had felt I had gotten enough metal, returning home to find that I had collected 60,000 raw metal, which my glitch metal smelting would mean 60,000 ingots. Which with all that metal cooking, I wanted to get a new force field and to try and get a mech using that OP blueprint, but I found that I couldn't craft it indoors, so that would have to be postponed. Instead, I went back to my Carchar breeding, hatching out some babies and managing to get one with a melee mutation, which at first turned out to be yellow, but later learned it was pink, and at the same time, Finger died, as when I went out with the Dreadnoughtus, I had left them on the city floor. Fuck! So to cure my depression, I cracked a bunch of gamble crystals, where I decided to imprint that pink Carchar, naming them Bubblegum, where I finished taking care of them on day 42, reorganizing the breeding operation with some of the new additions I had gotten, and with that, I wanted to try and get another Dreadnoughtus, a male for Gojira so I could get my hands on an imprinted one. Heading out on the look for a vein, remembering the male that I had found earlier, grinding for tributes while I was looking, where I remembered I would need a new mana armor. So I postponed the looking and went into the snow dome to find one, finding a decent mana in the snow, using a bear trap to pin it and knock it out, taming it pretty easily. If only I had thought of this when I was taming Reingar. Heading back into the wastelands to search for an alpha node, jumping around the map in search, breaking any inadequate corrupted nodes and drops to make room for spawns. Finding a max level Dreadnoughtus instead, which was female and had no nodes near it, so all I could do was take note of it. But on day 43, I was finally able to find that alpha node, on the opposite side of the map from any Dreadnoughtus. So I went back home to craft the Zeppelin, remembering from when Extinction dropped, you could use them to transport Dreadnoughtus. Though when I went to the male Dreadnoughtus I had spotted earlier and tried it, it failed to work. And thinking it may have been tied to game mode, I tried to switch it, quitting the game, which I soon realized that deleted the alpha vein I had found, putting me back to square one. So I went ahead and brought the Zeppelin back home defeated. Then returning to my search where I spotted a beta node near the male Dreadnoughtus, and figuring if I didn't, I would probably not find another decent vein for a long while, so I decided to settle and use that one to tame the Dreadnoughtus instead. Using Rush to lure it near the node, then feeding it element to complete the journey and begin the taming method, defending it from the fauna and taming the thing at level 178, which somehow it was still better than my female, which was higher level, and since I was already there, I finished off the defense of the element node, completing it on day 44 and getting around 200 element as my reward. Returning home with my new companion, where I immediately set up my 2 titans to start breeding, wanting to see if my work would pay off with a monstrous offspring, which since I was already breeding dreads, I decided to do some Carchars as well. Hatching out my very first Dreadnoughtus baby soon after, finding it adorable as I went about raising and imprinting my new sauropod, which while doing that, I ended up getting some new Carchars which would replace their forefathers. So I went ahead and reset the breeding rotation for them once more, imprinting the Dreadnoughtus to full, where it turned out to be an absolute beast, attaining almost 200,000 health, which definitely shifted my plans for the King Titan fight, and I decided to name this baby Dread King. And while offline, I had learned while scrolling TikTok, yes I'm there, go check it out, that the Dreadnoughtus could be thrown on the back of the Desert Titan to kill it, and I wanted to do that. Fuck the orgies, I wanted to cheese the hell out of this Titan. However, Dread King still needed to heal, so while waiting for that, I decided to go out and try to get another legendary drop, utilizing a new strategy. So I went out to look for one, failing, clearing out the bad ones to find nothing, so I just went back home, and some spiders spawned in, attacking and causing my Gigas to fall off the ledge, so that was fun. And I had forgot to put my parachute back on my hotbar, so when I dropped down to retrieve them, I fell to my death. Recovering my body and the Gigas, I reorganized them and then returned to the Carchar breeding, only to hear an OSD in the distance, spotting it and jumping out to it, finding that it was a legendary, so I went about running it using my new strategy, which was to set up those metal structures I had gotten in an outer defense, using dino gates for an inner defense, and the force field at a smaller setting as a last line of defense for the drop, hoping that the metal structures would break the creature's AI, though while setting up the force field, I ended up turning it off on accident, so one of the layers of defenses would be down for a while, making it to where I had to depend on the metal structures as the battle begun, which the metal gates served me very well, but the walls they made were quite ineffective. Alas, the battle raged on, battling the hordes, cutting through legions of corrupted, and fucking up the force field again. But eventually I managed to get it up and went on grinding through these hellish legions. Get off my shit! Get off it! 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 Stop touching my shit! Stop touching my shit! Stop touching my shit! You too! Go! And while I was able to cut through the monsters with ease, my defenses were slowly being corroded, which was becoming quite a concern. So in a desperate gamble, I decided to take a card from PvP players, using a bunch of foundations to spam the area, which in turn confused the corrupted's AI. A resounding success which gave me the room to breathe and clear out the creatures with less of a worry. The spam works! The spam works! The spam works! It breaks their AI! They prioritize the spam before the drop! Oh, if only I had more, because then I could lay it down each round! Eventually throwing out a Giga to help bolster my defenses, but slowly and surely I carved my way through the waves, killing on and on into day 45, until we had arrived at wave 12, where the force field was getting really low, so I decided to end the drop there, finishing the OSD at the beginning of wave 13, ejecting the pod and gaining a ton of good loot, including many good BPs, a bunch of black pearls, and element, which I honestly did not expect. I also got some more metal structures to replace the ones I had lost, some veggie cakes, and some amazing weaponry to bolster my armory. These legendary drops were quickly proving to be extremely viable for my addiction. Returning home with my spoils, which a meteor storm began to rain as soon as I did. Thankfully, I didn't run that drop for much longer. Getting back home to put away my stuff, and then putting that Daedon that I had gotten all the way back in day 12 to heal Dread King, pairing its passive heal with Pixis healing to rapidly heal my titanic comrade. And as a bonus, got me a ton of owl pellets, which by day 46, I had managed to fully heal Dread King. My tectonic titan was ready for war. And having gotten a good saddle from looting, I went about saddling them with it, and headed out to test my new monster, only for a storm to spark up as soon as I went out. And while it was a fake out, I saw a lightning strike in the distance, which confined my rampage to the desert biome. But oh boy was Dread King a beast, quickly matching and then far exceeding the strength of any of my creatures, absolutely obliterating anything I came across. Getting him to be able to hit some things for 50,000 damage, one-shotting enraged Rexes, and getting him to hit corrupted creatures for almost 70,000 damage. These Dreadnoughtus were insanely broken, which seeing this might in display made me far and above confident enough to try and kill the Desert Titan, but for that I would still need Starko scales. So I went to the swamp trench in the city to go get some, going on a killing spree, getting what I needed, and then dropping by home to clean my inventory and get the rest of the tributes I may need. And then I went to go kill the Desert Titan on day 47, cleaning through the cave and summoning the massive aerial titan. And immediately got my shit folded, fumbling around and getting struck by a lightning bolt. Though I was able to get back quick and regather my gear and continue the fight, getting on Dread King and proceeding to kill it, which Dread King was able to effortlessly accomplish, completely unaffected by the Titan's thunder and slaying the beast in no time. The second Titan falling from the sky, Desert Titan down, which I was able to get some pretty decent loot from it as well. And with the Desert Titan down, I was now obligated to breed out another batch of Gigas for the King Titan fight, putting aside the Carchars and Dreadnoughtus to stage for the hatching, which figuring I would need them anyway, I decided that instead of breeding them out every time I beat a Titan, I would instead breed out all the rest of the Gigas that I had planned to use for the King Titan fight, which was 80 total, meaning that I needed to hatch out an additional 60 Gigas. Yeah, I had a lot of work ahead of me. So pulling up my sleeves, I went to work, hatching out batch by batch all the Gigas I needed, laying them out, feeding them, imprinting them, killing the inadequates, stashing them away, and then beginning the next wave to do the exact same thing, which this went on through the rest of this day 48, and to the beginning of day 49, imprinting the very last of the Gigas for the Legion. Hours of work, but I had finally assembled all the Gigas I would need for the fight. Bullshit! Which left me with the leveling. First taking the time to craft all these new Giga saddles, which would need a ton of resources, mainly fiber and hide, which with the theory I got some fiber, and then with Rush, I went out to go into the wastelands to go out on a killing spree, killing as many creatures as I could get her fangs on, going even into the King Titan's lair to get as much as possible. And eventually finishing, I went back home with my haul, crafting those many saddles and remembering that the Gigas would level in the cryo balls anyway. So rather than having to go out and level them, I could just throw them out and allocate the levels they had earned. Which I went about this button mash session, leveling and saddling all of them going into day 50, finalizing the last few and completing the Legion. Which as reward for that tedious work, I went out to go get some treasure chests, getting some decent shields, which honestly would have been better for Ab than here, but good loot is good loot. And since I was on a roll of breeding from the Gigas, I decided to take that momentum to try and get some really good Dreadnoughtus, deciding that I wanted to bring a couple of them to the King Titan fight as well, hatching out a decent few and naming the best of them Titanus, deeming them worthy as a future pocket. Finishing raising those, I then went ahead and did some preparation to run some more OSD drops, but giving some thought to how much metal I used for saddles, running the numbers to find that I had spent almost 10k on all the saddles for the entire Giga Legion, and figuring that with the combined cost cost of force field repairs, future mech production, and honestly just wanting a lot more, I decided that it would be prudent to head out on yet another metal run. But also realizing that I would also need cementing paste for the structures to defend drops, and having procrastinated it for a long while, I decided first to head out on a stone run with Raz, flying with Nightmare and heading down to the rivers of the sunken forest to get as much as I could possibly muster, eventually finishing with an astounding 130,000 stones. So heading back with that stone, I went about using it and the mass stash of chitin I had been saving to craft a ton of cementing paste, then collecting Crunk, Sky, and Nightmare to head back down to the sunken forest to go on that metal run, going through the underworld caverns, getting as much metal as I could possibly find, inadvertently finding the Forest Titan cave while I was at it, eventually finishing with a massive haul of 70,000 metal, which is by far the most metal I have ever gotten in this game in one session. Which, with that new stockpile of metal, I wanted to finally craft that mech, which still couldn't be made indoors, so being a lazy little fack, I went ahead and made a second replicator, which I put outside. Yes, that's what we call privilege, children. Placing a battle rig garage while I was at it, and then went about crafting that amazing mech BP, crafting my very first mech in day 52. Finding that it was pretty good, coloring it with the returning Dino Painter mod to make it look as cool as it was, which I couldn't just craft this thing and not test it out, so I went out with my new war machine testing out its strength, which while not as powerful as my Gigas, Carchars, and Dreads, it was definitely a competent fighting machine and would at least serve me well in the task of taming the Titans when that came to be. Returning home to play around with the garage, but I never really ended up doing anything with this, sorry peeps, where I finally decided to do that preparation for OSDs, getting together a bunch of structures I had gotten from the previous ones, crafting some new structures, grabbing the force field, and deciding to bring some of those new Dreadnoughtus. Then heading out to try and find one, just to get cold feet with the thought of meteor showers, realizing that it had been days since one occurred, and not knowing their patterns, it would be really risky to put so much effort into just one drop for the possibility for a meteor storm to start while I was doing it. So I stopped, did some research, and got some inconclusive answers. So I just went out looking and hoped I would be fine. Going through the wastelands, killing corrupted creatures for tributes, despawning drops and veins, and eventually managing to find a legendary drop in the King Titan's lair. Fuck that, no. So I went ahead and just despawned that one, and failing to find any legendary drops, I decided to settle with the yellow drop to pass time, deciding to run it with just Reingar for a challenge, which turned out to be near non-existent as Reingar slaughtered the hordes with ease, confidently beating the OSD on day 53, which the loot wasn't too bad, but it definitely was not worth my time. So I wasted more of my time looking. Yay! Kill me now! Going around the map clearing out drops, which arks seemed to pity me as it rewarded me with a max level Mororex, which I immediately fumbled trapping it, but eventually managed to and began knocking out the hybrid monstrosity and subduing it, feeding it some kibble to tame my very first Mororex. And I couldn't help but try to see how powerful it was. Naming her Dominatrix, I went out and tested out some of her power, finding her adequately mighty, and that just made me wonder how powerful an imprinted Moro might be. So with that prospect, I went out with a new secondary goal, to keep an eye out for Moro so I could possibly get a good male to match Dominatrix, where I came across an enraged Rex, which I couldn't help but kill with my new companion. Then heading back out to look for more drops, only to find nothing of worth. And while offline, I learned something that might massively impact my looting, discovering that switching my game mode can make it to where my creatures could no longer damage the drop. And since this was just a solo 100 days playthrough, I figured it wouldn't hurt to do so, changing the game mode to PvE, gathering some extra creatures, and heading out to test this. Which, if y'all don't like the fact that I did this, just get in chat, stop me when I'm streaming. I'm gonna do it if you aren't there. I'm sorry. Not really. Which I managed to find a legendary drop on day 54, where when testing it out, I found that indeed I could no longer damage the drop with my tames. So with that in mind, I went about setting up defenses and throwing out a horde of my own monstrosities to defend the drop with me. Which when the hordes of corrupted began to attack, I also learned by extension that the wild creatures could no longer damage my structures, which indeed heavily impacted my experience running the drop, merely needing to clear through the hordes of corrupted, wait for the stragglers, and clear through them again, with nary a worry of the drop being damaged. I had found the perfect, totally not cheese, way to do drops. But after a while, I had grown tired of how often creatures were getting lost in the rough terrains, so after about an hour of running the drop, I went ahead and ended it at wave 9, packing up my stuff to go get another drop in a better location, managing to get some decent stuff, but nothing of note worth. Dropping by home to drop off my loot, and then heading back out, which while clearing out drops, I decided to get my drop drop running down to a science, using some creatures to help measure out just how much range you could have on ASE before the drops despawn, which I found that it was roughly around 375 meters, which means the max safe range you could get away from the drop would be around 350 meters. And because I knew how stupid I would be, I gave myself the max range of 300 for safety precautions. And hopefully this information proves useful to y'all running drops. And with this new info, I went out looking for another legendary drop. However, even into day 55, I failed to find any legendaries. However, I did manage to find a red drop, which out of curiosity, I wanted to test my creature's power, deciding to just use Reinguard on one of my Dreadnoughtus to run the drop solo, pissing off a wild one in the process, but thusly beginning the fight where my Dread struggled to hit the corrupted creatures around to my defenses. And while anything that got near me would die instantly, I could barely hit any of the smaller creatures, so I ended up just pulling out Rush to get the job done, cleansing the hordes and finishing the drop to get some pretty decent stuff, mainly being black pearls, which if you have the patience and the firepower, made OSDs a far better source of them than the King's Lair. But my loot goblin wasn't finished yet, so I went back out looking for more drops to run, finding another red drop, and if I did it once, why not twice? Setting up the defenses and going about the battle, which went as well as you would expect, defeating it pretty easily after 20 minutes, getting some decent loot including more black pearls and some polymer. But I wasn't done yet, as I wanted even more loot, heading right back out to look for another to run, locating a legendary drop. So I went about setting up the defenses and the creatures, beginning the battle promptly, cleaving through legions of corrupted, slowly but surely defeating wave after wave, doing what at this point has become regimental, and surely defeating wave after wave of abominations. I managed to get to wave 16 on day 56, where the sky turned purple, and you know how this ends. I get scared, I don't want to play this game no more, I end the drop, I don't pick up the gates. I don't pick up the gates? Ah, whatever. I get the loot, I get very good loot, I get very happy, I realize that the storm was just a thunderstorm. I get sad because I could have gone farther, but accept reality like a good Ark player. Taking my goodies back home, putting them away, where I decided to use some of the OP blueprints that I had gotten thus far to make myself some good gear. However, after crafting them, I realized that I already had better gear, so instead I just went around collecting the best armor and weapons I had. Then putting some of the new gear traits onto them and completely forgetting that I ever did so. Which then a chatter wanted me to go and tame an acro, and I said, why the fuck not? Spending my time till day 57 looking to no avail. Which nearing day 60, it was about time to finally take down the final titan, Mr. Mega Groot. I mean, the Forest Titan, which I wanted to try and 1v1 it with a Dreadnoughtus, because damn bitch is OP. So I ventured my way down to the sunken forest, heading to the forest cave and running it with Rush, clearing through the creatures in the cave with ease, crawling through crevices and finding the secrets of this cavern, including the Tomb of Ascension, even getting to the terminal, yet I still could not find the artifact. Scouring over the cave until I defaulted to Google, finding where the drop was supposed to be, only to discover that the artifact had fallen through the floor. You can play at that game. Hey, fair is fair. Ark fucks me, I fuck back. Y'all should know the routine by now. So with the artifact of the growth, in my inventory, I went about summoning the Titan, the final of the 3 to be defeated. And I beat it in 4 shots. Yeah, the Dreadnoughtus is kind of OP, and not gonna lie, so were my stats. Kinda intentional, as these vids already take so long, but if this video can get 500 likes, yes, that's a big ask, but if it can, I will have the stats to make the game more difficult for the next story map. Anyways, gathering the loot from the Titan, I left the sunken forest shortly after, feeling accomplished. Here, I ended up finding a Tech Rex on my way home, which it was decent, and would be a decent trophy name, so I went ahead and enslaved it, or I guess in this scenario, captured it and stuck it in cryostasis for all eternity. Honestly, one of the better ways to go out when it comes to me. And now with all 3 Titans dead, I would need to kill them 2 more times. And to kill them again, I would need more tributes to summon them. Which while I had most of them, I lacked the Soro vertebrae, the Sarcoscales, and some corrupted hearts. So I went out with Reinguard to collect those, needing 30 of each of the regular tributes, and honestly I don't remember how many hearts. Going out first for Brontos, which were being elusive, making this endeavor painful, as they went around the wasteland slaughtering well into day 58, going through the lands killing Brontos, trophy creatures, Mororexes, and even Dreadnoughtus to feed my vertebraic needs. Yes, I just made that word up. It's not that serious. And I grew tired of trying to get Bronto spines, so I went to the Swamp Trunch in the city for Sarcoscales, just to find the same exact problem, which I had begun to think was because of the sheer amount of spawn clearing I'd been doing, thinking that me clearing out so many spawns had started to break them, which to resolve that would need a dino wipe to clean the slate properly. But before I wanted to do that, I wanted to take the last bit of vertebrae that I needed, heading back out to go collect them, going through the wasteland, killing Brontos, and even killing that level 150 Dreadnoughtus for that task, but eventually I managed to get the last ones I needed, and with that, I went ahead and dino wiped. And with that, I went grinding for Sarcoscales, though they were still proving elusive, so in a desperate attempt, I scoured the map for possible spawn locations, using my own logic rather than the actual spawns, and found nothing. So I relented to a similar strategy I used for the Gigas, clearing spawns to force Sarcos to spawn for me, which was a grindy, tedious, fucking annoying as hell process, but it worked. Working my way through the slaughter and collecting into day 59, going up and down and up and down and up and down and up and down and up and fucking down that godforsaken trench until I was able to get all the scales that I needed. But with that, I had all the tributes I would need to fight the remainder of the Titans and to tame them as well. So now it was time for the murder spree. Starting with the Desert Titan, as I knew it would be the most annoying to kill, using Nightmare as the flyer to get up to it, and then using Titanus to thundercut its back into oblivion with diabolical backshots. Killing it quickly, however, Nightmare wasn't following me, which led to a messy and long set of events of me trying to get my Dreadmare back, wasting my time all the way to day 60, where I was able to finally recollect my steed and proceed to fight the Desert Titan again, doing so with ease. Yeah, maybe the stats are a little too strong. Next, heading to the Snow Cave, as I wanted to fight the Ice Titan next, wanting to see if a Dreadnoughtus could as well solo this titanic adversary. Cutting through the cave and summoning the Ice Titan for the first time, dueling it with my Dreadnoughtus, though Rush got involved and melted its health surprisingly fast, so after getting the head, I went to go and spawn it again, planning to use Rush this time, which to no surprise, I was able to melt the Titan with surprising ease. Where from the loot I had gathered so far, I decided to put together a suit of tech armor for myself, getting together a full set at home while I was getting tributes. Now, for the first time ever, Yujiro Babma has attained his canonical strength. Don't fact check me, Yujiro Babma Soul is your favorite character, neck diff, stay mad, seethe. Next was the death of Mega Groot, heading to the Sunken Forest, clearing the cave, and 1v1ing it with Rush. Which, yeah, it was a one-sided fight. Somehow I turned Titan fighting into Coughing Baby versus Hydrogen Bomb status. Collecting the loot, delving back into the cave, the artifact not spawning. Then it did, me collected it, me summoned Mega Groot, me snaps its balls offs. Killing it to attain the final Titan head I needed for the final fights ahead, which left me with only the King Titan to best. Yeah, fuck that, I'm not ready for that, hell no. So I went back home to do some more breeding, hatching out a ton of Carchar eggs for fun, I guess. Breeding be torture, but Mr. Babma yearns for the cock and ball torture. I don't know at this fucking point. Which, going through a laggy collection, I went about filtering out the good ones from the bad, placing out the good ones and putting away the bad ones, where for some demented reason, I decided to imprint them all. Didn't have to, but why the fuck not? Torture myself some more, fighting through walls of flesh to painstakingly imprint these children, squirming through the horde, feeding them, walking them, getting disappointed in them, punishing them, until I finished with them on day 61. Though from the best of them, I picked myself 2 new pockets, which I could maybe use in the future. And I guess I wasn't done kicking my nuts in, as I decided to do the exact same thing with Dreadnoughtus. The much larger, slower moving, hard to navigate dinosaur. At least these guys would be useful. Going about the chaotic mesh of dinosaur raising, I worked slowly through raising, feeding, and imprinting them all, fighting through the wall of dinosaurs to eventually get them all done and raised. Which, with that done, I took a second to name the new pocket Carchars, naming them Red Rush and Firework, then completely neglecting them to get to work on my future plans, mainly the Taming of the Titans, which the most complicated of them would be the Desert Titan, and I had 2 plans for them, a fun method and the normie method. For the fun redneck method, I wanted to get a Tapejara with a tech saddle to break the corrupted nodes on the Titan, so I went out to find one, immediately doing so as Extinction has an infestation of Tapejaras. I mean, seriously, what the fuck is this? And after taming it, I was then graced with a returning viewer who had named the Velonosaur, and they wanted to see how it was doing. So I went ahead and brought them out and went about saddling them and playing around with them for a little bit. Yeah, my attention span was a bit extra thin today, and while out and goofing off, I managed to kill a Moro with just my guns on day 62. Finding a Dreadnoughtus in the wastelands, which I wanted to see how fast Gabo could kill them, which after getting spanked, I was able to melt in no time. And to continue my session of random bullshit, I went out with the equipment to go and run an OSD, which I came across a blue one, and with my newfound power and my tech suit, I wanted to test my metal. So I went about running the drop with nothing else but my suit of armor and my guns, having a blast of a time butchering creatures, though the audio wasn't recorded, so all I have is my tweaking voice as I went about the slaughter. Come on, get some of this shit, boy. Who wants a piece of Yujiro Babma? Who fucking dare? Get off my thing. Get your head taken off. Get your head taken off. Oh, call me fucking All Might. I just A-trained that motherfucker. Come get some, you bitches. Come get some, I fucking dare you. Which, with ease, I dismantled the small horde and beat the drop, collecting some frankly ass loot, but I had fun either way. Enough goofing off, though. Now was the time for the Titan. Titans. I wanted to get about getting the equipment that I would need for the task ahead, crafting my new Tape attack saddle, and then heading out to test it, which it was okay, I guess. Then crafting my mecha shoulder cannon, using one of the blueprints I had gotten from OSDs, and with those set up, I went out to the Ice Cave to summon the Ice Titan one last time. Which, to say the least, taming the Titan was a far more difficult task than killing it, dancing around to avoid its devastating attacks, chipping away at the corrupted nodes which manifested on its body, narrowly avoiding attacks and occasionally getting pinned down. But I can tank it, right?
Nope.
Ah, shit, this is gonna be bad, this is gonna be bad, this is gonna be bad. Oh, this is bad, this is bad, this is bad. Unfreeze, unfreeze, unfreeze. Dude! Do not stun lock me, you son of a bitch. But slowly, I managed to chip away node after node, eventually getting to the final one on his chest. And on day 63, where after launching a barrage of attacks, I finally managed to subdue the Titan, collecting my very first Titanic ally. Cryoballing it, which is normally not possible, but thanks to Dino Depot I was able to. Bringing my new comrade home for safekeeping, healing my mech with a Daedon, which doesn't really make any sense, but if it works, it works. And then, ready for the next fight, I went to the Sunken Forest for my second Titan, the Forest Titan, going through the cave and summoning it, which much like the Ice Titan, this confrontation was much more difficult, dodging colossal swipes, avoiding the toxins of poisonous spores, and slowly chipping away at the Titan's corruption. Taking one arm, then the other, and finally left with the growth on its chin, I spammed as accurately as I could to bring it down until finally the Forest Titan fell to the ground. And there I claimed my second Titan, cryoing it and heading back home, which left me only one Titan left, which I hadn't gotten everything that I needed to tame it, as I still needed to prepare for my backup strategy, which currently I really just wanted to fight the Desert Titan with my Tape and whittle away its corrupted nodes with a tech saddle, but in case that didn't work, I wanted to have the normal method ready, which involved a Quetz, which I didn't have yet. So I went out to look for one, remembering that I had seen one near the sulfur trees. However, when I did in fact find it, I also found a really good level Moro that was male. And with the tantalizing prospect of a Moro Legion, I completely detoured to tame that instead, trapping it with some Dino Gates, knocking it out, and feeding it kibble, which quickly it tamed, and I now had my second Moro and the key to a legion of hybrid monstrosities. Which, not wasting a second, I brought it home to begin breeding, hatching out a couple eggs to bring forth the very first spawn of my future army, now having one more addition to the King Titan fight, which one of the first ones that hatched, I decided to make my own pocket, using its rapid heal ability, which I discovered when I grew up, naming them Flash for their colors, and then heading out with my new monstrous steed to test it out, going forth on a killing spree around the sanctuary where Flash quickly rose to be a powerful addition to my forces, surely rising to similar strength to both my Gigas and Carchas, and while doing all that, I had managed to find a level 145 Quetz in day 64, which seemed like fate, so I knocked it out and went about taming it, defending it from a testy Moro, and eventually adding the new flyer to my forces. Yet after leveling the Tape and the Quetz, I would need to give them time to heal, so I decided to head out for some more OSDs before the end, heading out to first find a red drop, which I wanted to use to further test Flash, going about the defense of the drop, which at this point you should all know what the hell happens. I defense drop, I drop bodies, I wait, and I beats the drop, getting some meh loot, but it's whatever, it was for fun. Though I also needed to go and run an element vein, as with my new tech suit, my consumption of said element was far exceeding my supply. So I went out looking, finding a bunch of shitty ones that I despawned, but soon enough finding an alpha vein, which I went about running, not before finding a really funny Parasaur.
You got a bomb in?
Going about the defense, which finished up in day 65, collecting myself a decent chunk of element to fuel my new suit of armor, which this had given the birds plenty of time to heal, so I went ahead and prepared them, giving the Quetz a platform saddle with a box on top to defend me from the flock, then taking the Tape out to the desert cave to go and try and tame the Titan. Coming from the portal, I went about trying to tame it, flying up with the Tape, where I tried to get it to hit its own node with its electricity, only for the flock to knock me off, and the Titan it did only with its electricity. So yeah, the redneck way was not gonna work. Thusly, I went about it the normal method, bringing the Quetz to the desert dome to find the Titan still there, grabbing my gear and starting the very boring method of just sitting under the Titan's wings and waiting for it to shock its own balls off. Yep, thankfully the Titan's AI had broke, so it just sat there, allowing me to half AFK as I waited for each node to die, which happened slowly, like slower than anything else I've done, but eventually in underwhelming fashion, I managed to tame it. Well, that was the most boring tame I've ever done, but at least I have it now. And with my new Titanic flying fortress, I went out to have a little fun with it, taking it through the city and back home, only to cryoball it anyways. Now I had tamed all 3 Titans, was. The army was bred, and I still did not want to fuck with the King Titan whatsoever. So to waste some time and to steal my nerves for the fight ahead, I decided to loot some last OSDs, heading out into the wastelands in search, only to find a loot crate from the Desert Titan, which intrigued me, so I went to the Ice Arena to not find one for the Ice Titan, which was kinda confusing. So I just went back home in day 66, forgetting about the looting, and decided to breed out some more Dreadnoughtus, figuring I could use more for the fight against the King Titan. No, Anakin, we need these children, you cannot 66 them! And I decided to get some morals as well, as Flash proved himself to be a very competent addition, and I figured some extra reinforcements would be welcome for the fight ahead, where I went about hatching a bunch of these creatures, going about the process of raising and imprinting them, managing to get some decent additions to the Legion. And with all that done, I went about finally staging the Legion for the final fight, gathering together some resources to make a fob in case something went wrong, and gathering all of my creatures for the Legion, crafting some extra mechs for the Mega Mech, and then bringing all of my preparation over to the King Titan Arena. Throwing out the Titans, which were acting really buggy, but eventually I got them fixed, staging them, then setting up the fob just outside the arena, a small metal box, which within I had a cryo box filled with the Legion, a bed, and a vault to put my stuff inside. Then heading back out to place out the first Legion for the Gamma King Titan, placing out the Dreadnoughtus, the Gigas, and then some Moros to top it off, where I then went about leveling them all up.
Thank God for passive EXP and these dino balls. I would have slit my own throat if I had to level all these things up.
And thus, the Legion was complete and battle-ready. My force to bring down the King Titan. But not yet, as I was still really anxious about fighting the Titan, and instead went back home to do some more prep, fearing that even with the Legion I had put out, and the reserves that I had in the fob, that they would still not be enough to bring it down. So I went ahead and placed some troughs on a nearby roadway, and went about putting together an area where I could do a bunch of hatching, dropping by the fob to put down a force field to protect it, and grabbing Red Rush, planning to use her to go out on a massive meat run, as I wanted to breed out a whole nother contingent of Gigas, Moros, and Dreadnoughtus, which would need a lot of food to sustain. Heading first to the King Titan's lair, but from there wandering around the whole map in search for large creatures to feed upon, clearing through Brontos, and eventually making my way down to the very south of the map, where there was an excess of Racers, Brontos, Spinos, and other large fauna. Going on this killing spree into day 68, where I had gotten enough to satisfy my demand. Heading back to the roadway, where I put the meat I had collected into the troughs, which now allowed me to go about the hatching of the reinforcements I wanted, laying out Giga eggs, Moro eggs, and Dreadnoughtus eggs to hatch, and then going about the long process of feeding, imprinting, and raising all the creatures to maturity, going about so in waves where I would line them up, wait for them to imprint, and go about imprinting them using a cuddle mod to make it simpler, as I was exhausted of reorganizing babies after walking imprints. Hatching and raising throughout the rest of this day and into day 69, where I managed to breed out a considerable amount of creatures to supply the battle ahead, though these new Gigas and Dreadnoughtus would need some saddles. So I went out with the theory to get a bunch of fiber, and then used the hide that I had saved from the meat run to make a ton of saddles. Which, with that done, I now felt comfortable enough to at last fight the Gamma King Titan, to begin the end of my journey in these wasteland ruins, to defy and defeat the shadow of corruption and return Earth to its former glory, here and now with my Legion, adding some reinforcements to bolster my ranks, and then approaching the terminal, putting the tributes in. What? What the fuck is this bullshit? I was missing Boa Venom, and a lot of it. But I decided just for that day to go out and get what I needed for the Gamma Titan. So, running through the wastelands with Flash, I went out looking for snakes to kill, which quickly turned into a tedious matter as snakes were somewhat rare, and to boot, they did not give guaranteed venom, which often meant that when I did find a snake, it didn't have any venom. And while slaughtering through the sulfur fields, I came across a horrifying sight. The Wandering King was out in the wastelands, which meant that I would need to kill that before I could fight the Gamma King proper. So, gathering some reinforcements, I went out with a group of Moros to take down the Wandering Abomination, which thankfully the battle was not too challenging, as the Moros shredded through the beast in good fashion and defeated it, bolstering my confidence for the actual fight to come. But first, more Boa Venom. But eventually I managed to get enough venom for just the Gamma Titan, so I began making my journey to the King Titan's arena, just to find the Wandering King Titan again. Why are you back already? So I had to take it down again, placing out my Moros once more and going for the attack, where this time the King had managed to get stuck up on a hill, which made it almost impossible to hit, where it managed to do some serious damage to my force, but after shifting the position of the battle, we were able to melt it back down to nothing. And this time I actually got some rewards for defeating the Titan. And with that done, it was now time to fight the first Shadow of the King. My first test against the Lord of Shadows, I therefore summoned the King Titan. getting as many creatures as I could to attack it, where many of my Gigas began to perish, but surprisingly I was able to bring it down in quick fashion, felling the beast within minutes. Yeah, I might need to reconsider these settings next time. Cleaning up the carnage of battle into day 70, I found that the casualties were actually somewhat severe, losing a decent few Gigas and most of the Moros I had placed out, but for the most part the Legion was intact. The Dreadnoughtus tanking the Titan's blows with surprising effect, and my Titans not even getting engaged in the fight at all. The next two battles were looking very hopeful, but I would still need Boa Venom. Fucking kill me now, God, please! So, needing 50 venom, I went out on the grind. First heading to the sulfur fields to try and find some snakes there, looking around the toxic waste where I struggled to find many, and of the few that I found, even fewer had any venom. And eventually this search grew extremely tiresome, so I decided to change up my approach. Heading to the desert titan cave, I went about killing as many snakes as I could find there, and surely there was a bunch more, but for every 5 snakes I killed, only 1 had any venom. So the search became long and tedious, me scouring the cave over and over and over, back and forth through the rest of day 70, day 71, and into the beginning of day 72, where I was killing and killing and killing and killing and killing and tweaking and killing and running and looking and killing and losing my fucking mind! But eventually, I finally managed to harvest all the boa venom I needed. But, absolutely exhausted and wanting to be ready as possible, I decided when I got home to do some final breeding, getting some more Moros, Dreads, and Gigas, as I heard that the Beta King Titan was in fact the most difficult variation of the King Titan, so any prep for failure was necessary. But then, in the morning of day 73, I was ready. With nothing else to do, it was time to fight the King Titan once more. To fight the Beta King Titan. Setting up the Legion that I would use to defeat him, restocking my Gigas and Moros, and once I had managed to finish that, I approached the terminal, and while hesitant, I summoned the King Titan once more. Just for my army to absolutely melt that fucker. Oh shit, it's done. Yeah, I'm starting to think I overdid it just a little bit. With all my forces besides the Titans, as they ignored me, I was able to bring down the Beta King Titan in exactly 1 minute and 22 seconds. Yeah, I really might need to turn down my stats just a little bit, which this made me extremely confident to fight the Alpha King Titan. So I said to hell with it and set up for it. But this time, to make the fight fair, I decided to battle with only the 3 Titans, a handful of Dreadnoughtus, and the Mega Mech. So, organizing this much smaller battalion, I went about summoning the final fight of this playthrough. The Shadow Lord, the Alpha King Titan. Ooh, boy, wish me luck! Ooh, here we go. Oh shoot, that meteor's gonna get me. Ow. Let's do this. Oh boy, I want to avoid that punch. Oh shoot, he's gonna knock me out. Come on, let's do this. Ugh. Hit that bitch. Bruh, all I'm doing is making him float. What the fuck? What the fuck? Get that bitch. Brother, I've stun-locked him. I've stun-locked him. We've stun-locked him. We're cheesing the fight. This is how you win. Is you just get a bunch of dreads, the fucking Titan under his toes, and he doesn't know how to work. Bro, this is cheese as fuck, but I'll take it. Best way to end this series. Cheese the fucking fight. Come on! You hell beast! Go to oblivion! We attack him though? Boom. Boom. Beat his ass. Oh, he's on stun lock now. Get that bish. Ooh, I'm about to take the brunt of that. We did it! We fucking did it! We did it! Honestly, no, like, I'm not gonna even cap. I thought we were fucked. I thought we were dead. Alright, let's do this ascension, boys.
Go on. Take a look. It's finally begun. The arks are coming home. Each one carries with it the seeds of new life. Plants, animals, and humans. And these seeds will take root across the far corners of the world. Once they do, all that life will be unleashed. From there, it will spread, grow, and thrive. And this planet, our home, will bloom once more. As for the rest of the infection, well, the arks can take it from here. In time, they'll purge every last bit of element from the soil. But make no mistake, this is all thanks to you. I'm just so happy I got to see it. You were the one that Helena, that I, was waiting for after all. Look at that. Suns are rising.
I hope you all enjoyed that video. Honestly, I'm gonna keep this short as I find that I'm terrible at these, but I really hope that you loved watching this video as much as I had making it. I've done everything in my power to get this video out to y'all as quickly as possible and really appreciate all the support that y'all have given me. It really means a ton. Y'all smacked it out of the park with Aberration, and I really, again, just gotta stress how much I am so thankful for all of you watching. It means a lot to where I can't even express it. I'm terrible at expressing it. All I can say, and I'm repeating myself, is thank you so much for your time and everything. Especially to those who were able to watch the video all the way through. Y'all spent 2 fucking hours on my stupidity. Seriously, I cannot thank you all enough. If you would like to see more videos like this, make sure to sub and like. That lets me know y'all enjoy this content. And if you find yourself bored waiting for the next 100 Days videos, why not check out my other videos? They're pretty cool too. Anyways, I'm done yapping, so without further ado, I will see you all in the next video. Peace.